I'm Mike Farrington. Welcome back to the boardroom. In this video, I'm going to build an incredibly useful work support stand. And I think this project is equally useful for the fine woodworker furniture makers, as well as the DIYers working on their house. Being able to hold securely a large or long workpiece makes working on it both easier and safer, whether it's routing a hinge mortise on an entry door, adding edge banding to a cabinet side, or hand planing a 10-foot long board. This support stand will make all of those tedious tasks easier. I'd also like to mention that this gizmo has been used since the invention of carpentry about 1,000,000 years ago. This is just my take on an age-old design, and I think it's cool that such a simple jig is still useful today in my modern woodshop. With the long-winded intro done, I get started by milling up some lumber to the proper dimensions. With the lumber milled up to the proper dimensions, the first joinery task is a half-lap joint. When doing layout for joinery like this, I don't worry too much about accuracy. The pencil lines are there to get me close, say within a 32nd of an inch. When I make my first cuts, I cut right up to the pencil line, and I know that the joint won't come together. I'm fine with that. I then make very small adjustments to creep up on a nice tight fit. I think this is a better way to go because I have found it impossible to mark accurately enough and then be able to cut to those marks accurately enough to have a joint come together perfectly on the first shot. Sometimes good old-fashioned hand tools are the best way to tune the fit of a joint. I added a 12-degree bevel cut to each of the 4 feet. I did this just to give it a slightly more snazzy appearance. Why 12 degrees? I have no idea, it just looked right. Here I'm cutting away material to create 4 individual feet, and I think this will reduce the chance that the stand will wobble on my incredibly unlevel shop floor. And here's a look at the fruits of my labor thus far, a nice strong base. Now that the lap joint is fitting snugly, I turn my attention to cutting a twin mortise and tenon joint. This joint is totally hardcore, and it's also totally overkill for this application. I'm doing this because I enjoy cutting and fitting intricate joinery, not because it's needed. If you aren't interested in taking the time to cut this joint, a mortise and tenon through the top layer of the lap joint only would work. A large dowel or domino would work, or even a couple of lag bolts run up through the lap joint into the vertical member would work great, and it would be plenty strong for daily use. And after cutting the mortises on the top layer, I use a marking knife to transfer them onto the bottom layer of the lap joint, then I proceed to cut those. Notice how carefully the shop apprentice is pedaling around. He came flying in like Valentino Rossi earlier, and I was concerned he was going to hit his head, so I told him to take it easy while he was in the shop. With the mortises mortised, it's now time to tenon some tenons. I establish the shoulder at the table saw, then I move over to the bandsaw for the rest of the cutting. Though all of these cuts could be completed at the table saw, I just happen to prefer the bandsaw for this type of operation. I think it's a little safer, and I also find it easier to set up. This is, of course, assuming that the bandsaw is set up real well and everything's cutting nice and straight and square. And same as before, I'm working up to a fit. I'm not trying to hit the fit right away. Take a cut, check it, take another cut and check it until things fit just right. And a couple more skim cuts is all it takes to bring the tenons down to the appropriate thickness for a nice slip fit. The last cuts are to establish the width of the tenon in the other dimension. Whatever the case, this is a not real critical dimension as I'm going to be adding wedges during glue up, and any slop will be taken up by the wedges. And the last bits of material are cleaned out with a razor sharp chisel and my mighty mallet named Waylon. Now that all the joinery is completed, it's now time to create the little hooks for the work support to hook into. And I lay everything out accurately, and I use an automatic punch to create a dimple for the tip of the drill bit to kind of hone in on. Here's a close-up of my mighty automatic punch. The strike force is adjustable by the threaded knob on the end. This is an inexpensive tool that really increases drilling accuracy. After layout, it's a simple matter of upchucking a 5/8 inch Forstner bit and drilling all the holes. I decided to mark and cut to the lines to complete these channels versus setting up some kind of a jig. These cuts are really only for clearance, so I thought just freehanding it and cutting it by eye as close as I could to the pencil line would be the quickest and easiest way to go. If I were to make this cut at the table saw, these little chunks of wood would have the opportunity to become spectacular projectiles to be launched from the table saw blade right into my face. So I decided to head that off at the pass and remove the bulk of the waste of the bandsaw ahead of time. I do a little hand planing and cleanup to ensure that this work stand looks as good as I do standing in the shop. It's critical to chamfer the bottom edges of wooden feet. This greatly reduces the chances that some of this grain will be grabbed and torn out as it's being slid across the shop floor. These kerfs will house the wedges that I will install during glue up. Speaking of glue up, it's time for the glue up. And glue up seems as good a time as any for a song recommendation. Funeral for a Friend, Love Lies Bleeding is a fantastic 11-minute, 9-second song. It's actually two songs squished into one by Sir Elton John off the Goodbye Yellow Brick Road album. I first heard the song while sitting in a popular fast food hamburger joint, and it struck me as completely odd that they would play that song in that restaurant for ambiance. I liked the song, but I didn't know the title of it, and this was before Shazam and YouTube. So later when I was home, I hummed the song for my dad, who was a pretty musical guy. He was able to decipher my horrible rendition and steer me to the album. And by album, I mean actual album, and then onto the song. And it's been a favorite of mine ever since. And as a quick aside, one of my very favorite bands, Dream Theater, did an unbelievable cover of that song. Now that this stand is complete, it's time to build this little thingy here. I'll call it the work support block. I was planning on running out to my local hardware store and buying some half-inch dowel. However, it's about an 8-minute drive each way, plus maybe another 10 minutes in the store, and I thought I could save some time by making it here in the shop. 2 quick pro tips when turning dowels. First, sight down the tool rest and make sure it's parallel to the lathe bed. This will help ensure the dowel is a true cylinder and doesn't have a taper. And 2, don't listen to me when it comes to turning. I'm a terrible turner. And I know what you're thinking, did Mike save time making his own dowels? Well, this video clip was a little under 4 minutes before edit, so I probably saved a few minutes. More importantly, though, I got a true to size dowel, a dowel that's accurately cut to the size hole that my Forstner bit drills. After expertly turning some dowel stock, I move on to drilling holes that the dowel stock will go into. Nextly, I mark and cut the dowels to length. Then I mark where the dowel will sit in the work support block. I do this so that I can come back and hollow out a little of that section. I'm not looking for a tight fit. I want a more loose fit in that section so that the block can flop around easily. Last thing before glue up, I remove all the bandsawn surfaces and I chamfer all the edges with my low angle block plane just to increase user comfort. Glue ups with moving parts are always tricky. Certain parts need to be glued securely together, other parts need to move freely. My recipe is I use the least amount of glue that I think I can get away with. Then as the parts are coming together, I make sure to keep them moving so that any squeeze out that may have made its way into that joint isn't permitted to dry the two pieces together. And to earn a few extra style points, I remove the pencil lines. I decided to go with wax for the finish. It goes on quick and easy and it makes the shop smell lemony fresh. And you know you're getting old when you can't find your sunglasses and you look around for 10 minutes only to find them atop your head. With construction complete, I thought I would take a minute or two to show a few different ways this stand can be used. If you have a face vise on your bench, it could be used to hold very large panels for hand planing, routing, sanding, etc. I added the longer foot on this side so that I could use the workpiece to push the stand back into place and hopefully it doesn't tip over. And for all the hand tool woodworkers out there, this stand is great for planing long boards. This is a 10-foot board. I'm able to take a full-length shaving. It is hard maple, so I'm exhausted by the time I'm done, but nonetheless it works. And for anyone out there without a face vise on their bench, this isn't just a pro tip. This is an actual trade secret. So don't tell anyone I told you or I'll get in trouble. But a traditional hand screw clamped securely to a bench will perform pretty much equally to any face vise out there. So if you need to hold a large cabinet side for edge banding, if you need to hold a door to route a hinge mortise, etc., all of these tasks are done fairly easily with this work support stand and a hand screw. And if you like the look of this twin torsion beam workbench that I'm working at, I have a video on my channel and plans available for sale on my website. And speaking of plans, I'll also have plans for this work support stand. I offset the hole in the work support block to offer some more fine adjustment by simply removing the block, flipping it over, and setting it back down on the stand. I hope you enjoyed the video. I think if you make one of these for your shop, you'll find it extremely useful. And thank you very much for watching. Until next time.